What was it? I'm apprehensive about the telling of this story. The events that happened are so extraordinary, so unbelievable, that I fear I'll be met with mockery. I accept this, I've got thick skin, and I'll try to tell this sorry story as simply as I can, so it can be put to rest, so to speak. I live at Crooks Road in Sheffield, UK. Now, this house is strange in the fact that it enjoys the reputation of being haunted. It's a large house surrounded by what once was a large garden, although it's somewhat overgrown now and has a dry basin of what used to be a fountain, along with some old fruit trees. It would have been quite pleasant back in its day. The inside is very spacious, with 3 floors and a winding staircase. The house was built in the mid-1800s by a cotton merchant who, rumour has it, died of a broken heart. Immediately after the news of his death, the story began circulating that the house was haunted. The subsequent tenants were simply caretakers of the estate, and they declared quite publicly that they were troubled by unnatural noises. Doors were opened on their own, furniture scattered throughout the rooms were, during the night, piled in heaps in the middle of the room. Invisible feet passed up and down the stairs in broad daylight. These hauntings carried on enough for the caretakers to give notice and leave the house. The agents simply replaced them with new caretakers. The noises and strange happenings carried on, and as more stories about the house caught on, the property found itself untenanted for 3 years. It was in this state of things that the landlord of my residency at the time had the bold idea of buying the property and relocating me there. I'm not really a man of superstition, so I agreed, and in the warm, muggy month of May, took residence at Crooks Road. As soon as I'd moved in, I expected something to happen. More specifically, I expected ghosts. I eagerly anticipated some supernatural experience, and when having friends over, the conversation was always steered towards it, as if trying to evoke some spectre with the expected jangling of chains to accompany it. After a month or so of living there, I had to admit defeat. There seemed to be nothing remotely supernatural in that house. This is how it was when an incident took place so awful, so utterly terrifying, that the hairs on my neck stand up right now as I speak. A good friend of mine, Philip, came round for barbecue and beer, as he often did on a Friday night. The embers finally cooled and we sat in the garden, reminiscing about days gone by. As the evening passed though, an eerie, dark feeling seemed to hang in the air. Every laugh suddenly seemed forced, false even. We both noticed our happy thoughts were becoming dark, and every subject we brought up seemed to end up steered towards something terrible. It was at this point that Philip asked, "What do you think would be the greatest terror?" The question puzzled me. "I've got to say, Phil," I said, "I've never really thought about it, that there would be one great terror above all others." "Me neither," he said, "but I feel I could really experience a horror greater than I could even imagine, that there's something out there actually capable of giving me such skin-crawling terror." "Come on, dude," I offered. "Let's chill and think of something else. Getting a bit morbid, this." Yeah, you're right, fella, sorry. My brain just seems so full of dread tonight, and I can't shake it off." I thought for a second. "Let's call it a night then, Phil. I'm knackered anyway." With that, we each went to our rooms for the night. The intensity of the night had made me really sleepy, so I turned off the light and wearily climbed into bed. The room was so dark I could hardly make a shadow out, but as I closed my eyes, something very suddenly dropped on my chest, seemingly from the ceiling, and I felt 2 bony, clammy hands close around my throat and begin to choke me. The suddenness of the attack stunned me, yet my instinct was to grab hold of my assailant around his body and squeeze. The thing, whatever it was completely naked and had the clammy, ice-cold feeling of a wet, fleshy, plucked chicken. I squeezed for dear life until at last the creature's long hands loosened around my neck, just enough for me to catch a breath. As I tried to move my arms, its balding head dropped down and it started to bite me with razor-sharp, needle-like teeth. Its slaver dripped down my chest as I tried to get up and climb on top of it. Its bony, agile hands clawed at me as I managed to secure the creature underneath me, my arms slipping against its wet skin. It took all my effort, but I managed to sit upon its chest while securing its painfully thin but muscular arms under my knees. I felt a little easier now. I sort of had this thing secured. I could feel its ribcage rising and falling underneath me. It was as tired as I was, and its foul-smelling, warm breath felt like it stuck to my face as the creature exhaled. "Phil! Phil!" I screamed into the darkness, and I heard my old friend stumble out of the bedroom down the corridor. The door flung open and the light went on. What's wrong?" Philip clumsily shouted, still half asleep. It was then, to my horror, that I looked down and saw nothing. I saw nothing there. Yet I could feel this creature writhing and struggling underneath me. "Help me, for God's sake! This thing's just attacked me!" I heard Philip tut and mutter, "Dude, you're drunk. There's nothing there." The thing underneath me bucked and tried to fling me off, and I'm guessing Phil must have seen, as he very quickly appeared next to me. He reached out, then sharply recoiled in horror as his hand touched the flesh of an invisible demon, hell-bent on escaping, and no doubt hell-bent on killing us both too. "There's a rope in the cupboard," I managed to say, as the thing struggled fiercely. Philip rumbled about for what seemed like an eternity before coming back, wrapping the rope around the creature's arms, legs, and finally, in an effort between us, its body. It was a hellish sight, seeing the rope uncover the shape of the beast's body and watching it writhe and squirm on the bed. I was utterly exhausted, the rush of adrenaline still causing me to shake, and I fell back into the armchair that sat in the corner of the room. Philip rushed out of the room and came back with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses, which we shared for the rest of the night in silence as we watched the bed covers twitch and move as the creature tried in vain to free itself from the bed. This carried on until the early hours, when we saw the struggling stop, and we asserted the thing must have been sleeping, and we ourselves drifted off into our own haunted sleep. Morning arrived and the creature was awake. This was evident by the convulsive manner in which the bed covers moved in its efforts to escape. "What should we do?" I finally managed to utter. "We need to kill it," said Phil in a trembled voice. "If we let that thing go, it'll kill us first, if not." I thought for a minute and then said, "You gonna do it then? I'm not going near that bloody thing." We left the room and locked the door, both weary, hungry, and desperately in need of a shower. In our fear and unwillingness to kill the beast or let it go, hours turned to days as we deliberated what should be done. After about a week, I went in with some fruit, fearful that I would starve the thing to death. As I edged towards it, I offered an apple up to its mouth. It rewarded me by trying to bite my hand, its needle-like teeth once again sinking into my flesh as before. I let out a scream, dropped the apple and fled, once again locking the door behind me. I dare not venture inside the room again for another week. The bed was still, but the form of the creature was still evident underneath the heavy rope. I moved closer to see the rope rising up and down, only slightly. I touched its arm, but there was no movement. Its breathing was shallow, and its heartbeat was barely there. It was dying. The cruelty I was inflicting on this wretch was overshadowed by the fear of it. I waited another week before venturing inside. It was evident the creature was dead. Its cold, stiff body had stopped moving altogether. I had, in the end, starved it to death. Me and Phil spent an hour digging its grave under the perished fruit trees at the bottom of the garden. It was surreal to drop this viewless corpse into its damp hole, but there was an uneasy relief in burying it underneath the clay. The house has been quiet ever since.